Welcome back to the second panel of Synaesthetic Syntax, 4th edition. We have a panel with two presentations. Unfortunately, the last presentation will not be presented here because of a tragic accident. The presenters cannot come, so we asked the presenters to maybe talk a little bit longer, so we have more time to discuss and to present. And we have two presentations on the topic performance, robotic interaction, stop motion, immersive experiences. So there will be, of course, a link between these two presentations. And it's great to have Louis-Philippe Demer here with us. He is the first presenter. Bill Vorn and Louis-Philippe Demer are prominent figures, so to speak, pioneers in the field of robotic art for the last 30 years. Their projects incorporate robotics, motion control, sound, light, video, and cybernetic processes. Their artistic elaboration is strongly influenced by advancements in human-robot interaction with focus on rational robotics and audience experience. Louis-Philippe Demer and Bill Vorn have been awarded many prizes on many media art festivals, including a Pre-Ars Electronica Award of Distinction in 1996 in the category Interactive Art with Scavengers. So, welcome, Louis-Philippe Demer on stage.
I guess this is mine. Okay, thank you so much, Julian, to have me here. It's because it's all right. Take two. Again, thanks for having me here in the expanded animation, Brigitta and Julian. And it's quite interesting for me to be part of animation as well, because they always ask me, what do you do? It's like, well, you're robotics. It's a bit like animation, but not quite. And so I try to unpack maybe some operational differences, some similarities, especially when it comes to motion capture or getting data from audience or participants and so forth. And the idea as well with the title is just want to contrast with digital world. This is why I put the word flesh. This is very organic. A robot is in your face, it's present, it's not virtual, it's very physical, it's very real. It can hurt you, it can do all kinds of things, so it's very present as much as a performer in theater would be. So what I'll do, I'll show you 2 or 3 projects. Some are directly involving harvesting data from the audience participating. So I'll reverse the presentation, I show you work, then we'll slowly thread through the presentation and try to put some labels or try to put some categories among all these projects. So first one, Inferno, we presented here as well as ours, I think in 2017 or 16, if I remember well. The most important part of this is everybody you see there, they are taken from the audience. They're not trained dancers. So we have to give them instruction, quote unquote, because they're about to perform. So basically what we say to them, well, have fun and or dance, do whatever you want. Just don't hit each other. That's all we say to them, basically, roughly. So we have to make a system where for the next hour, they're going to be moving and kind of performing. So it's kind of a following instruction art paradigms, but at the same time, it's a generative system. So it's not, we just start with a super simple rule. Of course, we have the device, which I will describe later. And we have all kinds of elements where we include motion capture and so forth. So enough said, just little excerpts. So maybe when it gets a question, you can ask me how it feels and so forth. But at this stage, it's mostly to show you the experience of people, like the name Inferno, as most of the work I've done, and it's going to be really clear in the next work as well, is the title is just a frame of mind, has nothing to do with the Inferno or hell or whatever. I mean, maybe being stuck in a loop in a machine like we all are with our mobile phones. But the idea is to set the tone, because this experience, most of us, I mean, none of us has wore an exoskeleton. This is army style and so forth. So we kind of bring it to the people to have a hopefully transformative experience and realize something about their bodies. And the experience is quite transcending, and it's not what people expect. So you see at the beginning, people are really nervous, but towards the end of the show, the people are really enjoying it. So it creates a very odd paradox that we did not plan ourselves. We just didn't know how it would happen. First time we did this show, we had no clue what would happen, because we could never rehearse with 24 persons. We rehearsed only with 2 or 3 persons. So that was equally scary for us in a different way. Another work, which you think it's, because it uses motion capture, but the idea for me to move body is, I can move you physically, try to move all your weight and so forth like an Inferno, but at the same time, I can make you react to a movement of a robot. So the blind robot is you sit in the front of a robot and the robot touches you. Again, this is a transformative experience. You probably never have been touched by a robot. Maybe more these days, but this back in the 2012, very unlikely, but it just brings a certain reaction that if you think about moving or animating people, there could be different ways. I can push you away, I can make you forced to go in the middle of a trail, and so forth. So it's a very, very broad definition about moving bodies. So I'll just show you a little bit of reaction of people.
Сможете ли вы довериться машине? Какие эмоции при этом испытаете? Это партисипативное произведение, в котором зритель и его реакция на тактильное взаимодействие с роботом.
Main point in there is when the robot, the first time it gets to you, comes to you, but holds on there because it creates the anticipation of the touch. Because as soon as you touch once, it totally transforms the way you feel the touch again. So the first moment is very important, exactly like Inferno. First time I move your body, you just open a strange door that enables or disables some reaction. And equally, like on the stage, so like these two are more participative, it's more for the people as an experience. But a while back, I did a piece with an Australian group called Australian Dance Theatre, where I literally tried to transform their body as it moves. So I made extension to actually break their natural movement. So it was really physical, almost as much as Inferno, even more, because they're professional. I could not do this on, let's say, untrained person. So I will play it. It's about another minute video. So in the imagery, when you see the person wearing these kind of strange contraption on the body, the theme of devolution was based on Parasite Rex, a book talks about mutualisms and parasitism, which is a very popular topic these days. Like people are talking about interfaces, robotic interface on the body as symbiotic. There's been the word symbiotic relation in human-machine interaction is actually quite an old term. So I was looking at ways to actually capturing some motion and disturbing their motion all the time. So there's actually, when the dancers are moving with this kind of quite powerful contraption in the body, there's an operator in the back that is looking at them and try to make them fall almost. So that will come back as well. Like the human in the loop is very important. This is probably the best AI interface you can get is an operator, because they can see well, and most important, they can predict well what's the next move. And they have a rhythm as well, and so forth. So this could be actually a good topic of discussion. Whoops, sorry, this one. So basically, first part would be about animating, motion capture, how we use it, or how we make, let's say, a modest implementation of it. There's nothing to do with the crazy precision needed for making animation in the digital world. And then I want to talk to you about the authorship, what they call procedural authorship. You can say instruction art, you can say participation art. Just in this case, it's because we just create, because there's a computer involved, there's some rules, so there's something that puts it in action, so that kind of binds, let's say, instruction art with the computer work and the scenography we just created. And then I'm going to talk to you about a few examples. In a case like this one, you see the dancers are wearing exoskeletons. They are passive, very much like the one in demonstration here on the first floor, second floor, the industrial one. So actually, in this case, I'm using the exoskeleton to limit the action of the people. They're actually a bunch of Amazon workers moving boxes for half an hour and just doing up, down, as they use in the real industry. So, somebody wrote in a very beautiful title, like when I see a thing about motion capture, they call it capture, hold, and release. Makes me think about fishing, actually, or when people, like they capture and then they release it. But at the same time, in this case, if you think about the process, you capture it, then you hold for it. If you want to perform live, you don't hold for very long. If you're animating for games, you hold it for quite long. You just distribute it and so forth. And then the release is very different. In our case, it's releasing robots. But not only robots plus the person is a unit, because you cannot distinguish the two separated. In the case of the virtual and the hybrid, then as well, you probably have the same scenario, I would say, where you can animate virtually, but then you have to make some alterations. So let's say when you capture all this motion, of course, motion capture to a model to then the release, there's all kinds of variation. But then is when you start playing with these information, how do you manipulate it to make it even more parametric? This is obviously a big challenge. But when it comes to robot, it's pretty much the same. Let's say classic thing is a robot painting. Up there, somebody will go, there will be a motion capture system, very much the same as done in animation. And then after, the robot can repeat all the same movement. In between, you have all the animators here. You know how much cleanup you have to do in motion capture and so forth. They have to do exactly the same kind of process. And this has to deal as well with the concept of inverse kinematics as well. Because if you go back to, whoops, sorry. If I go back to this one here, whoops, one too far. This is the data you start from to move, let's say, the animation. So it means that from a point, you can control the animation. So for the robotics perspective, from the point, I can determine all the motor's position and so forth. Very similar, except in both cases, you have what they call singularities and so forth. So there's actually many ways I can point there, depending how I go. And of course, if you're animating people, you don't want to break their bones. And it's quite interesting as well for the contrast, that motion capture, you think about bones. This is why I put flesh as a title as well, to say I'm looking at maybe something a bit above. So most of these things presuppose that there's an inverse function possible between the cloud points to making the object move, which is not always exactly the case. So this is important, the one-to-one relationship. The opening night, there was the dancer with the 4 arms, and you were like 4 paraders in the back. So this is a one-to-one relation, okay? Whatever the 4 person were doing, 1 arm was doing it. And you could see the concentration they have, because it's very difficult to do, because you're trying to project yourself in another domain. So it's not as easy as, okay, I move like this. If you do it yourself, it would be easy, but the mediation through the robot is quite complex. Topobo, which is a fantastic project, I think it was exhibited here a long time ago. What they do is they create this relationship, but with a free form. It's basically, imagine your Lego blocks that could be animated. But when you animate, you have a one-to-one relation with the object you created. I can play just a little bit, but I think one of the goals when you play with these things is to get close to these elements. I think I will get to the construction soon. So all the animation you see there, basically you build the object and then you say record and you move it and then it will move for you afterwards. So there's no, basically, the programming is done through the body of the object. So this is as easy, I mean, not as easy, but this is a goal that we all want to achieve, because if I say, like, when I'm programming the robots, I say, you can do this, this, and that, I will be really happy to do so. But this is in a case, it's a one-to-one relationship, exactly like when you had in the performance the other day. And behind the scenes, when we're playing with the blind robot, very similar scenario. This is the hand of the blind robot, and this is me doing very, very early test about triggering motion and so forth. The question you have to ask yourself is, like, if I record one motion, does it fit for every kind of person, tall, small, etc., and so forth? So I'll let you this as a computational exercise, but this gives you a bit the gist of what's happening behind the scene. It's a modern mechanical Turk that I created in this case. But if there's no inverse, what happened? Let's say if I play this little video up there, come on, little mouse. Okay, so this is, let's say, your motion capture of these small robots. When you see at the cloud points, you see, okay, this is kind of crawling. There will be all kinds of motion happening in there. But the problem with these robots, they are here, they're performing in front of people, they're about this high. The only way to control them is 2 frequencies of motors. One is bouncing like this, and the other one moves the shoulder. So if you want to feel how this robot walks, try to imagine walking without bending your knees. You walk like a penguin. So they are passive, there's no sensors, but they're really hard to make fall off. So this is the animation. So if I would start from the cloud points to there, it will be almost impossible, because to control this robot, this is what they call natural computing, sorry for the expression, or morphological computing. So you build something and it behaves without really controlling it. So there's a whole field of, let's say, AI, the 4th wave of AI, which was bottom-up, with rubber bands and things like this, and pretty much the way we are as well. The material makes the motion. So the question there is, like, when there is no model or no direct inverse, what do you do? So same thing when I have people. It's basically, if you have people, you just make impulse and they behave. So that's the robot in motion. So you see, I'll just play a little bit. So basically, you can spend a lot of time playing with frequencies and try to make it fall or turn around. So there's very specific harmonic frequencies to make it go faster and slower, more energetic or something. They're very, very expressive. And just a little word on the title, the Tiller Girls, there was a lineup group from, let's say, early 20th century, because there's a big argument saying, are these robots able to perform or not, even if they're really mechanical? So there's a lot of discussion coming from performance theory. So I had 32 of those in a performance. Bill did a piece as well with now, like, what's the mapping between, let's say, a dancer with a motion capture suit and a structure which is arbitrary. So then the mapping is arbitrary. You have no more one-to-one. It's not a matter of inverse. It's basically you go from a gesture from the dancer and you say, okay, this is going to happen to the robot. So this becomes quite arbitrary in this case. I can maybe just cue somewhere. This doesn't let me forward too much, but I think I just could skip it. See, so you see, like, the motion is kind of a dialogue between the two, so you process of discovery as well from the dancer equally with all kinds of motion. All right, this one I describe. So let's say I go to Inferno. Let's look at the release. It's basically exoskeleton, so it's a kind of a almost one-to-one mapping. It's a one-size-fits-all, so and it's basically doing a diminished version of what the shoulder can do. There's only 4 axes of movement as opposed to a full 6, but that's enough to do. And the thing as well, it's pneumatic because you need a lot of power. I don't know if you ever realize how much power you need to raise your hand. This is actually, if you want to buy a motor that does this, this is why exoskeleton is so expensive. And as well, you have to think that with touring with this, the beauty of using these kind of technology, which is more for putting caps on beer cans and assembling cars, you know, this is actually mostly, most of these parts are on an assembly line. It's quite easy for us because it's plumbing. We just deal with, if there's a leak, there's a leak. If your computer doesn't work, doesn't leak data, you just don't know. And so it's very, very different. It's much more robust in the process. So just to make a little example of the big difference between animating. So this is Bill and I, like first tryout, you know, it's a while back. And next to us, these are the exoskeleton without people. So same motion, you see extreme difference in the movement, which is kind of obvious, but it's worth seeing. So conclusion, one of the first conclusion with this is, let's say, if we're all performing together, we're all going to be slightly different because we don't have the same weight. Some resist more, some let more go than others, and so forth. And that's as well the beauty of it, because as well, if I raise the arm of everybody, it's like if your legs are free, obviously you can dance. But if I'm like this and somebody looks at me, but I'm bending over just a little bit, people go like, you know, it's not the same movement. So it's quite, the interoperability among people is very confusing as well. So that makes it, at the same time you are with everybody, but you're by yourself in your bubble. So it creates a quite interesting contrast. And little motion capture suit of, let's say, very modest quality. So this is one old exoskeleton we had, so we put some sensors on it, and in the middle of one piece, the person can trigger the movement of the others. And this one is quite, it's the first time we've done it with that person. It's a bit low quality because I took it from the web. I think he was, you know, quite a master of the whole group. And the idea is, if you're very far, you don't even know who controls you. So there's going to be a discussion about the whole role about us as puppet master and the system as puppet master and then your neighbor as puppet master and so forth. So in a case like this, I'll show, it will become a bit more clear is how do you establish the dialogue? So we have 2 small units that are with us. They're basically, one represent every motor, every cylinder. So you have to think that kinematic is an on-off process. So when we move, we have to say move a lot to trigger the motion and move back a lot. So when you see us moving, it's very exaggerating. But what happened is when we start playing with this, they all dance. There's no difference in their brain because it's like it's been happening for half an hour, and then they go, okay, the system is moving me. But the moment they realize that we are doing this, then this flips again. Because then they start almost dancing with you or for you, and then you. And if I go back to the human in the loop, this is something that I'm really aware of the dynamics, so I know if I want to lift up the people, I know exactly what kind of little motion I can retrig and so forth. So but it's quite a chaotic system, so I can play this one. Am I doing for time? Am I good? And this was at the Transmedial right before COVID. Is great. And the funny thing, Bill and I have a very, very different way to operate this thing. So he's got half the crowd, I got the other half. The only thing we know is we know when to stop on the beat. You know, it's like we heard that track so many times. And it's generative as well in the soundtrack. The movement we do, they have little sounds here and there, so it's happening too. All right. Lastly, I mean, of course, there's a lot of motion that's been captured. So a lot of the system is done with live. I think in the slide before, or maybe it's coming. Same thing as motion capture. You got a way to record, playback, and so forth. It's going to become more apparent in some of the work that I'm going to show. And this is something that I tried for Inferno early on, but we're going to retry again in the new project. This was the interface for a mobile phone. You could basically be in the front of somebody and play with them. Because you have to think that this is not everybody can wear the exoskeleton. Usually you go with your friends. So we tried to do this, but this is already too complicated for... You have to think that I have 5 minutes with the crowd before to tell them what to do. And if you have to explain long things, it will not work. So it has to be super simplistic. So a new version would be more shaking your phone to shake the person and stuff like this. So it's usual. Procedural authorship. I'm gonna just two references as an example. William Forsythe, that was in Choreographing You at the Hayward. There's all these rings. So basically, he invites people to go across that room. So basically, the device or the scenography invites you, compels you to move yourself in the space. So he's actually choreographing you in a very passive way to this element. And he's got a series of work, Forsythe, if you look, there's all pendulums in a room and so forth. So I invite you to go at Choreographic Objects by Forsythe. He has a very, very deep thinking about how to create spaces to make you move. And here, like Rashid Areen, like this one is at the Tate. It's just a bunch of cubes that people can move around. So like these are my example as to say, how do we start from very minimal, very simple procedures to build an emergent system. So basically, I look at the people, I'm harvesting their intelligence and their embodiment in the space, and I try to make the most of the moment. For instance, this is a work I'm doing right now. This is Braus Newman and, of course, Ula and Abramovich. You basically encounter a robot in a corridor. So basically, the robot forces you to move out of the way. There's no dialogue, there's nothing. It's a very simple but highly, highly complex thing to do because it's kind of one of these Boston Dynamic dogs, but instead of having 4 legs, he has two legs down and 2 legs up. So he's just basically shifting in an odd way. This is kind of inspired of one encounter I had in Singapore. During COVID, there were delivery system. This is asking me to get out of the way. I think they were remote control somehow, but I find it very cute. So it's the whole idea to, and a lot of these things is like you have to think that this is like the dogs and all. This is not so far in the future. You know, they are there. So how are we going to navigate with all these strange objects in not in a performance context? So the idea, like mocap, we present it as part of the spectacle. So like people gonna start to think about who's controlling you, what's happening, how come I'm having fun being controlled, which questions, you know, I always come back to a very old French writing about voluntary servitude. So like this, like in 1300, they're already writing about how you approach the power and so forth. So it really deals with these elements. So it's very important that we keep this. And as well that this was in Paris. We had the luxury to have a video wall, so that enabled us to push a bit the demonstration of the motion capture, so they could have close-up on when it's happening, because you have to think that in a scenario like this, it's pretty hard to know what's happening, and it's kind of the beauty of it that there's too much things, and you lose some, you get some more. And as well, I think I flipped maybe not the reference. Anyways, I'll correct this. I think the next one is from Ellen Levy, this one. But the idea is like when you participate in the Inferno or many of these things, you voluntarily engage yourself. We're not forcing anybody. So there's a kind of an interesting consent. It's very similar to interactive art. Interactive art always demands you to interact with the piece. So there's a demand from the system. If you don't interact with it, nothing happens. So in this case, people are literally taken in there, and that's part of the idea is like people actually, they stuck in the exoskeleton in this case. They cannot go away. There are people who will help them to leave the show if they don't want it, but it's very important that for the motion and for the sensation to be stuck with this. And little example, this is the briefing with everybody around, telling them, okay, this is what's going to happen. Don't worry, you won't break your bone and so forth. And this is before, and this is after. It gives you an idea of like just the system in a plain way. This is where when the theater comes from, like the idea is like you start from something very simple, like let's say motion capture, a release system, which is very simplistic. But when it's staged and put in context, it gets much bigger. And what is very important as well is how we can, and this is the next work we're doing, because right now Inferno is quite one direction. So mainly there's a few interactive things coming from one person wearing a suit and so forth, but we want to distribute it way more. This was, I took it today. It's an old video, 1992, Lauren Carpenter. It was in the Hauptplatz. It's very low res, of course, at that time. I don't know if you're aware about this work. It's a voting system somehow. So you have all these little sticks here. People are playing Pong. So people are moving their things, saying like, okay, up or down and so forth. So big crowd participation. I was even there, and it was actually surprisingly working very well. So the idea is like in the next piece, which is called Godspeed, we're going to distribute the motion capture. So for instance, up there, the new suits we're building, they all have sensing, because the first one we couldn't afford it. So basically, I could be with somebody else. I move my arm, the other one moves its arm. So you have to process of discovery, how you can engage together, and so forth. It looks simple process conceptually, but in operation, it's going to be quite challenging. And moreover, we want to have group reaction. So we already did some preliminary work on this, so to have everybody being able to make percussions together. So you have to think that you have to capture one, maybe controls the rhythm of the rest. You have to quantize the system. So there's a lot of background thing, but it would be possible to get everybody to kind of make some audible music, or maybe just alter enough of the soundtrack so they feel that they're participating as much as, let's say, the wish would be like Lauren Carpenter work, where you feel you're part of the voting system. So there's all kinds of ways you can map the system, hierarchical, like communication and so forth. But once you get the infrastructure, then it's up to you to do it. And of course, like I'm looking at how we're going to build the interfaces, inspiration from, this is very old, like already teleoperation for surgery and things like this, old mechanical devices and so forth. So basically, you just want to capture some kind of body motion and translate it. But again, before I go to a couple more examples, Nikola Tesla, I mean, we all know of him, but when he did his remote control demonstration of his submarine to raise money, of course, he invented the wireless communication. So his first demonstration, he had this little submarine going in the Potomac River in Washington, and people were mesmerized by this object. And Nikola Tesla coined this action as borrowed intelligence. So for me, that's very important that there's AI here, but I'm into borrowed intelligence. When I'm doing the puppet, the system borrowing my intelligence to do these things. So now I want to harvest as much as possible of participation from the people. So another example I've done in similar to the performance you've seen here, this was done in 2019. The difference is, let's say, like the 4 dancers who are there, they're in control of the capture. So they have buttons on there. They can say, okay, I'm controlling my other arms. I'm playing back this and this pre-recording. So they could do it and alter. And this one in the middle had the same capabilities, but just a bit much bigger and stronger. You can just play just a little bit of this one. So you see the control panel on their chest. This is done with consumer electronics level motors, like the one you have in your toys. Nothing except the big one, which is a bit more. This one is a bit more elaborate. This is in rehearsal, so you see the one in the middle is going through a loop and so forth. So the idea is how can I go from, in the new piece called Godspeed, how can I go from previous example, you see this in the dance piece where I can use people as lighting apparatus almost, dynamic one, to try to integrate this on the body and so forth. So I won't be too shy to show you myself. This is something we were playing like last week, try to see how we can make something slightly complementary to Inferno, because the thing in Inferno is you have an exoskeleton, it fits the body, and that's quite clear. As soon as you try to put something extra, then of course, what is the meaning of this, what's the purpose, and so forth. The exoskeleton, goes without saying, was there to move the body. When it gets a bit further, we don't really know. So this is me with the IMU in my hand controlling a moving light. The one in the middle controlling these 2 arms, and more IMU over there. So the idea is just like try to start playing with this. This is just we're more like at this stage looking as like, is this interesting at all? How can we go? And of course, the background is always like, can the budget afford it? That's the main thing. Okay. Just to kind of wrap it up somehow, paper by Pedro Lopez and Müller about agencies of bodies, and like this is coming from human machine interface. So on one side, you have a sense of your body ownership. So you can think, okay, what I'm doing is coming from me, coming from the system. And on some other axis is like, like this is imposed to me. This is like I'm, you know, in this case, they say like I'm a super body. So like if I make something that makes me very strong, you realize that you're being strong, not only manipulated. So you have, so it's all like ways of seeing agencies. But for me, the main point in there, like when they put Inferno in the chauffeured body, you've been driven. And actually, I disagree with that because this is shifting all the time. There's moments you're going to feel very much like this, but there's other moment you're going to maybe have a small incursion to say, okay, I'm there and there. So I think this is interesting to play with all those. And of course, above it's, there's of course a lot of studies about bodily sensation, especially to, you know, think that you have a double, that you have phantom limbs and so forth, and coming from psychology. So this is for me like a very good inspiration. Try to, what are there scenarios like this you can recreate somehow to have, let's say, you know, find your double in the room and things like this. And finally, what is very important is the dynamic of changing the interrelation between the people. It creates different scenarios. You can, you know, like just the way you set up the mocap and the setup, it changed totally the reaction. A perfect example, Rimini protocol, they have the uncanny valley here. This piece called 100%, so they get participative performance, so they get the people, they vote on things, or they ask them question, are you this or that, and then you see dynamically a pie chart in the front happening. And it's really based on people, very participatory. So the idea is to get the people to get involved in some kind of bigger apparatus. For those who like sport, you know, treadmill was invented for the British prison to make an extra punishment to the people. If they say didn't have nothing to do, we're going to put you on a treadmill to make something totally useless. There was no point. They were not harvesting electricity. There was, yeah, so they, here you go. So the piece is called Godspeed because it's about singularity and like it wishes us good luck with the upcoming AI and robotics and all the latent danger. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Fantastic insight into a body of work that is great to hear considered also in the expanded animation field. That's very nice. As of course we are always discussing the boundaries of pre-ars electronica categories. I think from my perspective, this is also a great example for the new animation art category, I would say. I have so many questions, and I think the audience as well. So I would comment. I had the privilege to participate in Paris. It's great to see how the participants are involved and the different roles. Like I was very skeptical and was thinking, okay, so there are different stages, like I can observe because there was a big stage behind and just watching what is going on. I can go there with my mobile phone and be also part, and I was shy and didn't want to participate. But at the end, everybody wanted to try it and everybody was happy. And this was like what you mentioned in your performance, in the presentation, that is like, yeah, the first touch is very critical. And I also observed with all these people that are supporting the people, because it's physically and mentally very demanding to participate, actually. I saw many people like, okay, getting out and the next one is getting in, and everybody is supporting the people to get out. So this is, yeah, and also, yeah.
Yeah, it's. I think to comment on this is the people are stuck in there. So when you want to stop or there's something wrong, there are people who are dressing you up. So the rapture, like that thing, is made in the front of the public. So it's totally integrated into the experience. So at the beginning, like they all strapping them, "Are you okay?" and so forth. Because once you're going. And as well, like you mentioned, it's a good workout. Like you half an hour of this, you're fully sweating, and it's. But the idea is like it's if you resist, It's very disagreeable because it's more like going to the gym. If you let yourself go, you have that bit of a puppet. And to think about, to mention puppet, like I should have put more things about puppet, but I know people are going to be talking about this as well. A beauty of a puppet is like it's physically, it's corporeal, it's existing, and to make a good animation of a puppet, you don't fight the puppet. You just play with the looseness, a bit like the Tiller Girls. So this is, when we start playing with the people, we have to find these things. And of course, we break it. Some people who come and say like, oh, this is totally against the rhythm. I say, okay. Of course, they are. Very, very difficult position to maintain is when it's static. If I put you in this position for 5 minutes, they all turn around and look at you, say like, please make me move. Because the more you dance, the easier it gets. Otherwise you're too stiff.
And then you get used to be controlled, so this critical perspective.
I think at one point they don't really think about this. It's kind of more like a ride somehow. Yeah. I feel like I'm part of a touring theme park and goes to the village and let's do this somewhere. I think that this is more their state of mind. And I think that it's more playful, especially when I show the little puppet, because, I mean, of course, the nature of the music is more happy, this one. And they just play along. When they turn around, they realize this, then they just want more. It's like, oh, it's a bit like when you play with your kid and you throw them in the pool, like play more, play more, play more. So it's a similar sensation I get.
Okay, are there any questions, the audience? Helen. Birgitta, sorry.
I didn't realize I experienced these at least 2 pieces of your work. Thanks a lot. It's quite insane to hear all the background behind it. What I'm fascinated by, maybe you mentioned it, maybe I missed it. So I think it's quite elegant that there's, as you mentioned, like there's a human with good eyes who can, help manipulate and control. So what do you think of that tension between robotics as the promise of automation versus how you apply it? Like how do you navigate that?
Well, I think it talks about this somewhere. Like I mean, this is more to show, like, I mean, like you always go in between utopian, dystopian, and so forth, of course, especially with robots and AI. But the idea in this thing is to show, like, we can flip the coin in 2 directions. I mean, of course, I wouldn't wear this 24/7. I mean, unless I need it for mobility or something. But the idea is to look at, let's say, especially with the blind robot, to look at something which is, you're quite defensive and see like how easily we engage and curious. This is what's fascinating about the discovery. And all these discoveries are totally embodied. It's a sensation. It's not intellectual. So I think for me, I use robots because they're right there, and there's no intellectual process involved in there. It's purely sensational. It's very, very sensual. That's very important to me. Like, you don't go there thinking about the background of mocap and all that stuff. You go there to have an experience, and a transformative one, hopefully.
So thank you for that really, interesting, complex work. And I was sort of thinking about the dystopian side of removing human agency and enforcing movement upon somebody. And my first thought was of Busby Berkeley and the kind of 1930s film choreography in which human beings are reduced to kind of cogs in a machine. And I believe he started out as an army drill sergeant. And then I was thinking about the mass spectacles of North Korea in a fascist sort of regime in which people are forced to be completely coordinated into certain patterns that they hadn't chosen. And of course, we have the origin of the word robot, from that Czech play in 1920, which does mean enforced labor. So I was thinking about fascism in relation to this work, and do you see it as a critique of the notion of freedom in a neoliberal society?
I never talk directly about this, but of course, I mean, it's all, background motifs in there. But I'm more criticizing the voluntary engagement of people into fascism. This is not fascism itself, but the fact that people engage themselves voluntarily. But this is one side. But on the other side, I'm criticizing conceptual art. I just want to do something where, you're touched by a robot. No, people who are touched by the robot, they're not thinking about dystopian world agency. They're just there to say, okay, this is intriguing. And they take this home, and whatever they derive afterwards it's perfect. I mean, it's very open-ended. Obviously, people think about when they see this, but everybody's different when you're there. Like, this is far from being a beautiful army drill. It's quite the opposite. And it's a party. It's more like a rave than a army demonstration. Totally. It reads like this as a first encounter, but it shifts very quickly. But it shows how much our reading can shift quite fast. And if you think about sameness and fascism and things like this, well, go and visit everything around you. We're really drilled to regurgitate concept.
May I ask a question? Thank you for presentation. I just wanted to ask concerning exoskeletons and these kind of devices which are moving physical body. There is probably physical rehabilitation sort of kind of interest in medicine or physiotherapy, and people who have suffered some neurological diseases or accidents or after car crashes, and to restore their physical behavior, and probably these kind of devices would be very practical. Or in military field, the exoskeleton question probably is very actual as well. And my question is, do you interact with these other fields in society, like military or physiotherapy or something?
Military never. Let's say when it comes to rehabilitation, this is so. This is like basically having a little toy car that you play with, and rehabilitation is something so much more complex. These are very, very simplistic. We did some proposal to be able for rehab, for instance. We submitted, I think, in Denmark about dancing together, try to have like rehabilitation. But I mean, as an artist, this is not my first reflex. I leave this more to the people who are involved in university research. If I can tag along, I'm happy. I can try out new things, but you're usually not really invited to these things. The toys are too expensive.
Philippe, we are running out of time, unfortunately, but you will be around, and there will be, of course, the possibility to discuss further things in the break. We will move on, and the next presentation is entitled Animating, a Concept Employing Stop Motion and Puppetry Lenses for More Than Human Experiences. We have 3 speakers on stage. Leoni Voegelin studied art history at the University of Basel, and with a master's degree in play and object at the University of Performing Arts at Ernst Busch Berlin. She has been a scholarship holder of the Elsa Neumann Foundation in 2021 and develops interactive installations and participatory performances as a game designer and media artist. Julian Salhofer is a junior researcher at the University of Applied Sciences St. Pölten. He graduated at the University of Applied Sciences Upper Austria, Hagenberg, and Friedrich Kirschner is a theater director, software developer, game designer, etc. He uses game structures as technology for participatory performances and interactive installations since decades, starting with Machinima, etc., and is a professor at the University for Schauspiel und in Berlin. So, welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much for having us at this wonderful symposium. Welcome everyone to our talk about animating a concept, employing stop motion and puppetry lenses for more than human experiences. So today I'd like to introduce you to this research project that we have at the St. Pölten University of Applied Sciences, which is called VR in Motion. And our goal is to push the boundaries of animation and cinema by combining stop motion animation and virtual reality. And we are also trying to create hybrid artistic tools and innovative workflows. In this project, artistic practice takes the center stage. We recognize the need for contextualization, but it is not the core of this project. We have an iterative development process where we kind of constantly ask ourselves, what is actually my question? And it is really important to always keep in mind from which perspective you're speaking, whether you're an artist or a technician or a scholar. We also document the whole process, so we maintain logs, we film our work, we do screen grabs, we conduct interviews, we record and transcribe pretty much every discussion. And not only do we document everything, we also always try to explain to ourselves why we made certain decisions at certain points. So our primary artistic instruments are the so-called experimotions, so we have 4 of them. In these experimotions are conducted through in-motion days. Those are workshops that we hold throughout the semesters. And we've created an inclusive environment that brings together artists, experts, and collaborators, and also students. And the 4 experimotions are as follows. So the experimotion 1 was in collaboration with guest artist Max Hattler, who is also here today, and Sune Petersen. Then, of course, experimotion 2 is in collaboration with Friedrich and Leoni. And the 3rd experimotion, which is going on right now, is in collaboration with guest artists Anna Vasov. And the next one will be in next year with Paul Wenninger. So today we'll have a closer look at the second part of the experimotions, which was conducted from October 22 until May 2023. So each experimotion is done in collaboration with our research-based artist studio in Vienna, Lichterloh. They consist of Clemens Gürtel and Christoph Schmidt. And we also had a student film crew present to help us document the whole process. Here we have some key research questions that we asked ourselves and that guided us throughout the exploration of experimotion 2. So, how did the art-based research practice take place? How are fictional and documentary elements combined in an immersive environment, and which narrative structures were chosen? How is puppeteering defined and executed? How is it combined with experimental stop motion? And how does the puppeteering approach translate to experimental physical interactions for virtual reality? I will now pass the mic over to Leoni.
Thank you. Yes, thank you for having us. So it was a very interesting project for us as well, because we then were invited by the St. Pölten University. And so since we are coming from theater, we had kind of a different perspective. So we decided to have a conceptual setup taking place in a narration and fiction to find kind of a framework for this. It was like 2 weeks and the time in between. So I will continue with the slides. So yes, for a conceptual setup, we then had a fiction, a narration that helped us to locate our project somewhere. And so we explored the world we created and the constraints of this world. And it was kind of like, it was inspired by a book. It's called Bodies of Extractions, like a collection of essays. And it was, the narration was about a worker underground and dealing with a kind of like a documentary setup, dealing with a plate tectonics and in a planetary scale. And it was a whole system. So we created a system with feedback loops to influence the world and, navigate it. And so we also had these inspirations from materials we collected, which were informed by the constraints we set ourselves. Like it was combined with humanity and nature parts, so we wanted to explore the intersection in between. And yes, so it helped us finding images and explore the also so-called puppeteering, which we will talk about later more.
Thank you. And as you can see, we were also thinking of different ways in which we can use images as evocative media to make sure that people attach stories and knowledges and different ideas of what these images mean to the individual images that we're using. And this, for us, was really important to do at the very beginning with the whole team, so that we would get an idea, because it was a very large team, and very few of us were from a theater background. So it was really important for us to get a feeling on how these external artists that we're going to collaborate with were going to work, and how we're going to work together. For us, being invited as people who come from theater and puppetry, where systems are usually in motion, everybody is moving, things are not stopping. Working with stop motion was a very interesting challenge, and something that we were quite interested in using this creatively. And the first thing that we latched onto was the idea of the frame. So me personally, as an artist, I was very much inspired by the work of Norman McLaren, who was also working on the materiality of the frame, the materiality of the film that was being transported, but also on a theoretical level, I was very interested in hypermediacy and remediation from Jay Bolter and David Grusin, who are writing extensively about what happens when you move one medium into another medium. And here we were not just moving one medium into another medium, but we were also collaborating between different modes of looking at media. Theater usually always has a very direct access to something, so you want things to happen very quickly, and you want to be able to evaluate things very quickly, whereas media art, there's a lot of coding, and then in the end, hopefully things look very good. This is obviously very condensed. But we felt like in the friction space in between these two things, there's an opportunity for us to work together if we plan things well. So I'm just going to quickly restart this video. It's a very short video. So we were asking from our collaborators what they would feel a cave built of frames would look like. So they would use our reference images and then just try to generate something that would be evocative, like that would seem like a frame, but they were bound to use the square frames to see if we can just transfer those things into VR. And so we played around with this a bit. And then here, this is an example from Julian, where we used shaders to extend things into 3D. And so we noticed that there's a lot of different approaches to the idea of moving things from a two-dimensional plane into virtual reality. And we felt that, and we became more and more interested in keeping to our narrative structure, because that seemed to be something that resonated really well with the team. So this worker that is underground, that is in a union, and that is talking about their day-to-day life, managing these tectonic plates, that was something that everybody could kind of resonate with. And then just like in theater, which has a lot of things in common with the military, planning is incredibly important to make sure that you're working efficiently. And so the things that we were really interested in is to make sure that we can not just come as artists, but also come as people who manage other people. And so it was really important for us to have like very clear structures, what we want to do each day, who is going to do what, and what the evaluation loops will be for the things that we're going to try out. So who is going to comment on the aesthetics, who is going to create tools, who is going to create content, and how are we going to discuss this iterative process so that we're not just creating random things and somebody says, oh, I like this, or oh, I like that, but that we are very, very quickly use a lot of different artistic approaches and try to create feedback loops so that people can talk and develop language about the things that we want to do. So this was a very important thing for us.
Thank you. Yes, and so as I said before, like for also the puppeteering aspect, we understood it in quite a broader sense. So we, these are like setups we created, and the intention was to also animate matter. Like not only you have a puppet and you animate the puppet very directly, more than we wanted to interact with matter and sending impulses into matter and explore the outcome then and look how it could be in a frame or how we could use it then for like a stop motion animation or in a virtual world. And so we tested a lot, and we then also we worked a lot with pixelation to emulate scale and power and chaos as well, like also to create more shift in perspective, like a planetary scale or like a microscopic way of seeing or looking at things, which therefore we also used microscope cameras. And so we created generative images that stop motion would then actually betray the actual size of the things. Oh, is it? Yes, yeah, it's still me. Okay. So yeah, also concerning in like towards the narration we had and the frame we wanted the framework. So we used also with the kind of these materials. We used a lot with sand and also water, and here we had ink in water, and it was linking the physical world with the virtual world as well, and we built Arduino circuits where we continuously stimulated organic matter and inorganic matter, and yes, and then we created some loops which we edited, and we used then these loops for having a texture in our world, in our virtual world. Yes, that's it.
Yes, and so the artistic research was split into two parts, and we tried to use it as one part to be more exploratory, to see how things would work, and the second part to be more production-oriented, to see how, if we could refine some of these notions. So here we played around with frames and with different types of materiality that you could look at. I think you could see a little bit more if you had the VR glasses on. But we found this quite stimulating, the idea of creating different sorts of textures around you, creating a sort of cave environment. We also very quickly noticed that things looked really good for the first 5 minutes, but when you watch it longer periods of time, they become super boring very quickly. So there's this inherent problem of VR that in the beginning, almost everything looks amazing. And if you give it some time, almost everything looks really cheap after some time. So that was definitely something that we were becoming aware of. Neither of us were from a VR background, but we still liked some inherent qualities in the movement. Like even here, we started noticing that it's not necessarily always about the frame, but it's also about how the frame reacts to your movement, to your presence in the space, how you're basically animating the space by your being in it and by the movement in it. And we also noticed that abstraction is always like an easy win. So the moment that you dissolve the frame and you use some of this organic matter and you put it free floating, like ephemeral, into the world, you can generate much more interesting and much more openly associatable spaces where people can read many different things into it. We really loved this, but our goal was to try to figure out if we can create very real narrative transforming spaces where people feel like they're in an actual place. And we still thought that we liked some of the stuff that we got from this experiment. We also liked some of the stuff that we got from like just overlaying frames over the whole, basically over your glasses in 3D. And then we combined both of these qualities, and it's a bit sad that it's so bright in here, because on the left-hand side you would, here there's stuff. We just pretend there's stuff. And we ended up using some of the more abstract work from Leoni as light, and some of the other abstract stuff as shadows. So we wrote shaders where everything that was lit would actually not just be lit, but it would be overlaid with abstract stop motion animation of fluids. And everything that was in shadows was also different sort of fluids, but inverted. And so we created some connections between the materiality that we got from the stop motion animation and the meaning in the VR world. So we really wanted to go beyond just this like 3D-ification of you have something flat and you put a displacement shader on it and now it kind of moves in a funky way. And we felt that this was actually working really well for us. Also, we noticed that we can use the same sort of stop motion quality to move geometry around. And so we very quickly threw away the idea that we were just going to work with the frame, but we're also then introducing cubes so that we can create more architectural structures. And we were also quite taken by the fact that we had a VR headset where you could close your eyes and open them up again. And since film and the materiality of film was something that we were interested in, we experimented with being able to edit from one scene to the other by closing your eyes and opening them again. And then you're in this interview situation with our worker, and then you close the eyes and open them again, and then you're back in the tunnel with all of the stop motion going on this way. And this was a shift in the way we wanted people to interact, to be more like editors or directors than just players exploring a space. There's one more example for a space that we did. This was a space where our worker would go and they would work on specific parts of the tectonic plate. So they would reform the tectonic plates. So they would work better together, and there would be less less cause for earthquakes. So the story was that the worker was there and their job was to monitor the two tectonic plates and use giant robot arms to make them more flush with each other. Obviously, 1 week is not enough to fully flesh out the story. Okay, and then I'm going to give over to Leoni for some interface work.
Yes, and maybe to add to framework of this work, it was also kind of like a museum style thing we designed, because you could enter the VR and then you could explore the rooms where the worker is or works, and then you could blink your eyes and switch to like this interview situation. But the sound of the interview followed you through the rooms you were navigating. So it was kind of interesting. I really liked this. And before I said that we were sending impulses into matter and influencing systems, now we kind of turned around and we're creating some interfaces to also again link the physical world and the virtual world, and so the audience or spectator could have some influence on the rooms you were seeing. And so we had a breathing belt. We did like DIY because it was 2 weeks, but it worked very well. And so it was capturing your breath and therefore animating the walls of the world. So we also were kind of breaking the frame sometimes, but then also breaking time sometimes, because then as you breathe, you were breathing, the world were kind of reacting to you. If you stopped, the world also stopped. So it was a reactive response to you. And then also we had like this material we used to create the images, like we used again sand to create the interface to move around the world. And I guess in the next you can see this a little bit. So as soon as you were grabbing like into this box or touching the sand, you were walking, like you did not have a body, but you were going forward, which looks like this. Yes, and then I hand over.
Yeah, so as we wrap up our talk, I'd like to reflect on some of the methods and findings of the project. So fiction and narrative were used to effectively spark discussions and immerse users in VR, blurring the lines between storytelling and observation within the project. Rather than adhering to a linear narrative structure, a non-linear approach was chosen. We internally refer to this as vertical slices, allowing users to piece together the story themselves, encouraging speculation about events preceding and following the featured moment. We defined puppeteering in combination with stop-motion animation as an abstract systemic process, where impulses serve as the driving force in shaping the outcome, as opposed to a direct transmission of physical movement. Different experimental physical interaction for virtual reality, like we saw before, the breathing belt and the movement in the sand, the head movement and the eye blinking are adding tactile and subconscious dimensions to the experience. I also like to point out that there will be the chance to view some of the parts of Experimotion 2 at the end of September in Vienna at the Forschungsfest Niederösterreich. And I'd also like to mention that we are already working on the third part of Experimotion 3 in collaboration with guest artist Anna Vasov. Thank you.
Thank you, Julian and Leoni, Friedrich for this inspiring presentation. Unfortunately, we are running out of time, so we have 10 minutes for a break. So grab a coffee and get in contact with these three guys to discuss stop motion and VR experiences. Thank you and see you in 10 minutes.